I'm very hopeful because, people look back on the past with this kind of wistful, good old days. But to me, my waking nightmare would be to wake up when I was a very little girl in the 1950s and have to live in that world again.
We're living right now in a time where even the most straightforward facts are disputed. Where does that leave science?
That's a great question, Libby. That's a fantastic question. Science has delivered the goods across the board. It's one of the reasons I've spent my whole life celebrating it, is right. Because, you can have a leader who has total contempt for science, fire the rapid response team that's scanning the horizon for the next virus or bacterial epidemic. You can take your magic marker and blot out the things you don't like on the weather map. You can fire and purge every single scientist who has the courage and the integrity to report their findings on climate change. But when there's a global pandemic, who are you going to call?
Absolutely.
Who are you going to call?
Exactly.
And so here we are in this moment in which everything hangs on the ability of the scientist to provide the tests, to devise the tests, to devise the vaccine, the possible remedy, to understand how these tragic epidemics unfold.
Right.
And yet, to me, this is just a rapid motion unfolding of the terrors and the suffering that we will bring down upon ourselves if we don't listen to what the climate scientists are telling us. Now that we've learned to listen to the epidemiologists, maybe we can learn to listen to the climate scientists.
This is a time of great danger, but our species is young and curious and brave. It shows much promise. In the last few millennia, we have made the most astonishing and unexpected discoveries about the cosmos and our place within it.
So cosmos has been a part of your life for well over 35 years at this point. How has TV storytelling changed in that time? Like, what is the biggest difference between 1980 and 2020 as far as creating television?
I think there are two very profound differences. One is our VFX capabilities have come so far. The first Cosmos was 40 years ago, and we were using what were then truly state-of-the-art VFX capabilities for television. Green screen was something rarely used before.
Oh, wow.
And we leaned on it very heavily for the first Cosmos. So that's changed because our ability to simulate the stunning beauty of the cosmos revealed by science has grown by leaps and bounds. And I'm very lucky to have Jeff Oken as our visual effects supervisor because he's not only a person of vast experience and talent, but also a great soul who embraced the possibility of showing the audience things that we believe happened scientifically, but that no one has ever visualized before. So we're very lucky. And then the other thing that's changed is our cultural metabolism. In the first Cosmos, Carl and I could be much more leisurely, more meditative. But we felt in this Cosmos, we had to pick up the pace because of the way that our audience has been trained by all of its different media.
Are there any stories that you discovered in the process of researching for this edition that took you by surprise, or that you sort of treasured, especially that you made sure got into the series itself?
Yes, there were 2 or 3 stories that I discovered in the course of creating the series and writing it with Brannon Braga that really stunned me. One was the story of a man named Kondratyuk, who I had never heard about and who I found by following this trail to see who was the first person who ever understood that there was such a thing as a gravitational assist, that force, that power that the Voyager mission employed to such remarkable success that now the two Voyager spacecraft are actually leaving the solar system. I wanted to know who that was, and I found the story of a person who suffered horribly and yet who played such a central role in our exploration of the solar system and even in our trips to the moon. So that was a stunning thing. And then there was one other story which really amazed me, and that was the story of Victor Goldschmidt, who really is one of the founders of the earth sciences, and who was the first person to realize that you needed to take all of the earth sciences together in order to understand not only the history of life on this world, but the possibilities of life elsewhere. It also turned out that he was a picaresque hero, a romantic and fearless foil to the Nazis. And he really tormented them, and without hiding who he was, managed to survive the Holocaust. Amazing story.
Is there any overlap for being a creative director at NASA and an executive producer on one of the most influential science shows of all time?
100%. And the Venn diagram of the two, they're exactly the same. This same circle, because, you know, in being the creative director of the Voyager Interstellar Message Project, I was really trying to tell a story and working with dozens of brilliant, passionately motivated people who, you know, we did the Voyager record for no salary, no money. The entire project took 6 months, and even in 1977 dollars, it only cost $18,000, which even then was not a lot of money.
No.
And I think there was there's a very great similarity in the people whom Cosmos attracts as a project. I think of so many of them. For instance, to have Ruth E. Carter, Oscar-winning, costume designer of the greatest blockbusters of our time, for her to want to come to Santa Fe and help us and to work with us on the costumes in Cosmos, couldn't possibly pay her more than just a token salary. And yet she was willing to schlep out to Santa Fe. And we all, of course, fell in love with her. Many people like that. Carl Walter Lindenlaub, our cinematographer, Brannon Braga, too many people. And of course, Seth MacFarlane, who has been really our champion going back 10 years.
Is it bittersweet carrying on this legacy without Carl right by your side, at least? How do you move forward in his spirit, with his spirit?
Well, everything is kind of bittersweet.
That's very true. That's very
everything, family, work, everything. I mean, that was just a feast of happiness and ideas and love and just every good thing I can think of. So I have to say across the board, there's not a thing that I would not rather do with Carl than without him. So, but when you're with someone, working with them and loving them and living with them for 20 years, in a very completely unsupernatural way, they're still talking inside your head because your brain, has heard so much had so much input from them that it's like there's the kind of, would Carl like this? Would Carl not like this? And so while I never expect to speak to Carl again or to hear from him, I do feel that I internalized over the beautiful time we were together so much of what I think his values were and his approach to things would be. But of course, he was a scholar, scientist. He knew many things that I'll never know, and I miss him terribly.
Oh, of course. I think it's safe to say he's missed globally around the world. So, what happens next? What story do you want to tell next? Do you foresee a fourth edition of Cosmos? I know it's years and years and years of work, but when you look ahead to the future, what do you see?
Well, I hope to do a fourth season of Cosmos. I have a growing file of stories I want to tell and ideas, and I just file them under season 4 because I really feel that there's so many stories to tell. And what I'm hoping in monitoring the success of a series in other countries, other places, and the companion book, which I'm very proud of.
Yes.
What I'm realizing is that there is a global community of people who are awakened to the power of science and to the need for us to adopt a scientific perspective, a planetary perspective, even a cosmic perspective on how we live and how we conduct ourselves, even in the most personal ways, as well as on larger scales. And so my dream is to do at least one more season. And I have a through line that I'm very excited about, and that Sam Sagan actually made a wonderful contribution to. And so what I'm hoping is that the whole Cosmos family, not just my own nuclear group, but the whole Cosmos family, everyone involved in this third season, will be able to regroup and to continue on making more hours of Cosmos.
What is it about science, about space that makes you hopeful, that makes you optimistic about the future?
Well, it's really more what there is about society that makes me hopeful. And science, the rate of science, the way that science can predict the future.
Yes.
And tell us, the climate scientists, the epidemiologists, they have demonstrated powers of prophecy that completely leave everyone else in the dust. They deliver the goods. And why? Because the method of science is so efficient at winnowing out the stuff that just isn't true. And so what makes me excited about the future in terms of society is because I'm 70. I grew up in a world that was so contemptuous of women, so contemptuous, so racist, so homophobic, so completely covered with these hideous diseases of perception. And while I'm not seeing that we got to where I dreamed we would be at this moment, I am really moved by the distance we have come. Because this has required a change in a kind of patriarchal structure that at one time seemed immutable, seemed like we could never, ever get to it. And so I'm very hopeful because, people look back on the past with this kind of wistful, good old days. But to me, my waking nightmare would be to wake up when I was a very little girl in the 1950s and have to live in that world again. I wouldn't go back there for anything. And so that gives me a lot of hope. It's 2 steps forward, 1 step back a lot of the time. And history is not some kind of, rocket trajectory. it meanders, but I mean, I feel overall this because we have the means, because of science and technology, to do this, to communicate today on this day of quarantine. That all is straight. That's, Michael Faraday, James Clerk Maxwell, their equations that seem so remote from anything daily important. And yet look at the world they made for us, that we can be together.